Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan, Napoleon Bonaparte, the end of 4 great conquerors. Imagine a man who cried because conquering 2 million square miles wasn't enough for him. Alexander the Great was obsessed with one thing. Conquering the known world for 10 years, he pushed his army through battle after battle, never fearing defeat. His men were exhausted and wanted to return home to enjoy their riches. But for Alexander, the spoils of war meant nothing compared to the thrill of victory. It wasn't about ruling. It was about conquering in India. However things took a turn, his battle against King Porus was one of his toughest, costing many lives. Even Alexander himself was reportedly wounded. While his horse was killed on the other side of the river, stood another Indian army ready to fight. While Alexander's troops were worn out, they pleaded with their king to go home to end the campaign. Reluctantly, Alexander agreed, and it marked the beginning of his downfall. After a night of heavy drinking, he fell ill and never recovered. His opportunistic generals gathered around him, asking who should inherit his vast empire. His answer to the strongest. What followed was a bloody power struggle between his generals lasting for almost 50 years. His empire, broken up into smaller kingdoms, was in shambles before it ever had a chance to become a legacy. But Alexander didn't care about empire building. It was always about Alexander. According to ancient Greek historians, his body did not decompose for 6 days, which they claimed proved his divine nature. Modern science suggests that Alexander may not have been dead at all, but in a deep coma, possibly hearing his generals plot against him before being buried alive. Then there was Julius Caesar, who idolized Alexander so much that he once cried while reading about him. "At my age, Alexander had already conquered Persia, and I've done nothing." Caesar reportedly said to his men his ambition drove him to undermine the Roman Republic, declaring himself dictator for life. He believed in breaking the law if it helped him gain power. His growing authority terrified the Senate, who feared he was paving the way for monarchy and the end of their influence on the Ides of March in 44 BC 60. Senators conspired to end his life. Caesar was stabbed 23 times during a meeting, and among the assassins was his beloved ally and adopted son Marcus Brutus. His assassination marked the end of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. But Caesar, in his final moments, saw the ultimate betrayal from Brutus, and that betrayal became his legacy in the medieval era. Genghis Khan rose as the most feared conqueror from the East, overshadowing even the Crusaders. While Alexander conquered vast lands, Khan doubled that and sought to unite the world under one rule, his. He didn't see himself as a god, nor did he sugarcoat his brutality. He openly admitted his joy in scattering his enemies, reducing cities to ashes, and taking their women. The mystery surrounding his death is a reflection of the secrecy he maintained throughout his life. One account suggests he fell victim to the bubonic plague. Another says he was shot in battle. A more dramatic story claims he was killed by a princess he had taken as a concubine. Genghis Khan's death was shrouded in secrecy because it came at a crucial moment. His army was in the final stage of a long campaign to conquer the Western Jia dynasty. To prevent their morale from collapsing, his death was kept hidden. Legend says that even his funeral procession was lethal. Anyone who crossed their path was killed to ensure the news of his death wouldn't spread. Fast forward 5 centuries, and you have Napoleon Bonaparte, a military genius and self-proclaimed artist of war. The transition from swords and spears to artillery suited him well. Napoleon's tactical brilliance led him to victory after victory, with his forces moving swiftly across Europe and the Mediterranean. However, like all conquerors before him, Napoleon's ambition was his downfall. The death tolls from his campaigns grew heavier, and eventually he met defeat at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Rather than execute him, the British decided to exile him to the island of St. Helena. There, in isolation, Napoleon spent his final years pretending to still rule an empire that had forgotten him. In his final moments, he uttered, "France, the army head of the army." Josephine summing up everything that mattered to him: his country, his military glory, and his beloved wife, Josephine. These 4 conquerors all met different ends, but they shared a common trait. They were never satisfied, whether by betrayal, illness, or isolation. They all died wanting more, their hunger for power and conquest never fully quenched.